Hello everyone, my name is Andrew. Today we continue learning Python, and today we will talk about immutable and mutable objects. So let's start. Once again, today we continue learning Python, and we will talk about mutable, so the objects that we can change, and immutable, the objects that we cannot change. So once again, mutable, or mutable, and immutable, or immutable. I don't know what's the right pronunciation, but whatever. So mutable are the objects that we can change, and immutable, as you may know, are the objects that we cannot change. So what's the difference between them and how they really work in Python? And why is it very, very important for every programmer who works with any dynamic programming language? So let's start. First of all, let me open my Paint and I'll show you how everything works in Python. So as you already may know, when we write something like a equals 1 or a equals some value, we do not really say that a is the value. We say that a points to that value in our system. So in our case, a does not equal value. No, that's not the right idea. A points to the value. Because in Python we only have links or not links but pointers. Yeah, pointers and links. So that's how it works. So a points to the value. And if our object is mutable, so if we can change our object, what we can do? For example, a equals value 2. First of all, we said that a equals value, and then we said that a equals value 2. What we can do is change that value. So if the object is mutable, we change the value itself. As you can see, the link itself, so the pointer itself, that arrow, does not change its direction, does not change the memory area that it points to, but the value itself changes. And that's what mutable object is. So we change the value itself. However, if we use immutable object, so if our object is immutable, we cannot change the value. So if I say value a equals value, first of all, then we create a new object, and then we say a equals value 2, we cannot change the value here because it will give us an error. But what we can do is change the pointer itself. So we cannot change the value. Once again, we cannot do that. But what we can do is leave that value as it is and then change the pointer. So as you can see, value 2, and we remove that connection completely. So in our case, what we have is just that. A points to the new value, so it points to the new area in our memory. And that's basically how it works. So that's the difference between mutable and immutable objects. So once again, with mutable objects, we can change the value here, but with immutable objects, we should change the pointer. So we should change the memory where our variable is linked. Like that. So that's basically how it works. And why is it very, very important? Because lots of concepts in Python are linked to mutable and immutable objects. Let me give you an example. What if you have a list? So with lists, list A, for example, what I can do is say, let me just print my list A, and then what I can do is say append 1, append 2, append 3. So if I do that, and I run my code, as you can see, everything works. What I can do in addition is, that will be a very great example, is I can do something like a from 0 equals 10. A on the index 0 equals 10. And now, as you can see, it says 10 to 3. So that's basically how it works. And why can I do that? Because the lists are mutable in Python. So if you're talking about lists, let me just remove all of that. If you're talking about lists, so if I have list A, I point again to that list A, and what I can do is put 1, 2, 3 here, as I did it in my code. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3 right here, and then I say A on the index 0 equals 10. So I do not say that you need to copy that list and point to the new memory. No, what you need to do is only change the first value. So you need to replace the first value with 10, and that's how that works. So that is our mutable objects. And why is that important? Because with mutable objects, you can change the value itself. So you don't copy the whole object, and that may be beneficial because if you need to copy the whole object, imagine that if lists were immutable in Python. So we would need to copy the whole object, and only after that, while we create our object, we needed to change the first value to 10. And that would have a very, very heavy memory we would spend lots of memory and lots of CPU power, because we need to copy the whole object and then we need to change maybe lots of things inside of it. And at some point in time, we have two copies of the same objects. And imagine that you have 1 million elements in your list. Then you have 2 million elements instead of just changing the first element of your first list. So that's why mutable objects may be beneficial. But with immutable objects, and the most common example of an immutable object is a list, what we can do is we can't change some value to another char. So for example, if I want to change H to B, as you can see, I cannot do that. And if I run my code, I will receive an error because string object does not support item assignment. So what does it mean? If you have a string and our A variable points to a string hello in our case, hello, then we cannot change the first letter of that or any letter of that string. Why? Because strings are immutable, and that makes them unchangeable, so we cannot change them in any way. But if you want to ask a question about plus equals or other functions that can change our string, so how we can change the string with like plus equal? We can do that because with plus equal, what we are doing is we do not change, and if you don't know, plus equal is just like add value to the string. So as you can see, hello B or hello P. And with that technique, what we are doing is we do not change the value here. We copy that value to a new memory address. So we get that value, we copy it, and then while we create our value, so once again, while we create our value, we add B at the end, and then we remove that old link. So that's how it works. And that may be very beneficial in terms of lots of things, and I'll show them to you in a minute. But as you can see, with plus equals, we copy the whole string, and then can lead to lots that can lead to memory, not leaks, but we'll spend lots of memory in while we're doing that. Because if our string is enormous and we need to only change one letter, then we need to copy the whole string. And that may be not as fast as we want it to be. It will be fast, but we'll copy the whole string. So you need to think about that when you change your strings, when you change your immutable objects. Another example where we need immutable objects and mutable objects is hash function. So in Python we have a very important function called hash, and hash is, again, if you have no idea about hash, then you can watch my videos on dictionaries because I explained all of that in that video. But hash is like a unique value for another value. So if we give hello, then I'll run my code, and as you can see, we have a number here. If I run it once again, the number will change. So numbers change all the time, but they do not change in the same program session. So as you can see, I put print 2 times and the value for hello is the same. And why is that very important? Because we can hash immutable objects. Because hashing function requires a value, and that value should not change whatsoever. So again, we need immutable objects in hash function. And if I would provide a list here, 1, 2, 3, I would receive an error, unhashable type list, because a list can be changed. An example would be A, so I have list A as 1, 2, 3 here, then I use hash from A, and then I append 1 at the end. And why is that very bad? Why we cannot hash mutable objects is because hashing is used inside of dictionaries. So every time you put key, for example, hello to 1, here you are using an immutable object. So here you're using hash from hello, like that. And of course you use it internally because you don't need to write hash every time, you just need to write the key and then the value. And I can put any immutable object here, for example, tuple. Tuples are immutable, for example, 10 here, but what if I put a list? A list, for example, 4, 5, 6, which points to hello. If I run my code once again, as you can see, unhashable type list. But if I remove that and I run it once, as you can see, my code has no errors inside of it. So you need to have all of the keys in your dictionaries as immutable objects. That is very important because immutable objects can have their hash. So we can calculate the hash from an immutable object. And hashes are used to quickly find our values inside of our dictionaries. That's why it's very important. Aside from hash, you always need to think about your default values in your functions. So if we have a function and we have A as a list, for example, then what will happen? As you can see, our list is in yellow. So yeah, it's in yellow markdown, and what we can do is use print a, but before that I want to append 1 to that list. And why is that important? Because when we create a function, as you can see I'm calling it 4 times, when we create a function in Python, so let me just remove all of that. When we create a function in Python, func, and I'm saying like a equals to a list, our function, what it will do, it will of course create a variable, and then a points to the list. And as you know, lists are mutable. So if we will change that list inside of our function, we will always change that list right here. So we only always change the same object, and that can lead to very unpredictable bugs like that. So as you can see, I want to only append one. I only want to append one time. So let me just change it to 10. I only want to append 10 one time in my list. So I only want to have a list 10 and closing bracket. But as you can see, what I have here is 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And every time I call my function, I change the same object. And that can lead to very unpredictable code outcomes. And because of that, you always need to use default values as immutable objects only. Because even if you're using immutable object, for example, hello, what we can do is, if I cannot change that object, so if I'm using hello here, let me just remove that, and I'm gonna do it like that. If I'm using hello here, even if it's the same object, and it will be the same object, I cannot change it. So if I would ever write like a plus equals exclamation sign, as you can see, I only have it once, because I do not, every time I write plus equals, I do not change hello. I create a new hello, like a new hello link for my variable, and only after that I change that hello. I do not change the default value, because default value cannot be changed because it's an immutable object. So that is why mutable and immutable objects are very important. So yeah, that is about immutable and mutable objects in Python. I hope you liked that video. Thank you for the watching. Subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, leave a like, and tell me what you want to see next. So thank you for the watching and good luck.